A pack could forgive hunger, debt, even cowardice if it arrived wrapped in the right bloodline, but it did not forgive a woman who made people question the stories they used to keep order. Alara Silvermane learned that truth beneath moonlight and torch smoke, in a white dress stitched by hands that called her blessed in the afternoon and tainted by nightfall. Love was always spoken as destiny in her territory, something holy and unbreakable. What no one admitted was that destiny could be staged like a trial, and a bride could be turned into evidence before she had even removed her veil. The sacred clearing still smelled of pine resin and rain when her mate stepped back from her in front of the full pack. Silver ribbons hung from the old oak beams above the stone ring. Her wrists were circled with ceremonial thread. Her pulse hammered so hard she could feel it in her teeth. He did not lower his voice. "I reject Alara Silvermane under Moon Witness and Pack Law." A stunned silence rippled, then sharpened into whispers. Elders who had blessed their union minutes earlier went still as carved bone. Alara stared at him, waiting for the correction, the explanation, the private conversation that would make this survivable. None came. His mother rose from the front row first, chin lifted, satisfaction hidden under theatrical sorrow. There were warnings about her line, she said to no one and everyone. Her grandmother bred outside sanctioned borders. We ignored too much. Alara found her own voice only because the alternative was collapsing where she stood. "You knew my bloodline before the vows." Her mate gave a small, cold shrug. "I knew rumors. Tonight I smelled proof." The crowd made room around her without touching, as if exile had already turned contagious. Someone laughed once, quickly, then swallowed it. Her father did not move from his seat. Her brother looked at the ground. Inside her, a single thought beat against her ribs in frantic rhythm. Do not beg. Do not kneel. If you kneel, they will call it confession. If you cry, they will call it guilt. Stand. Keep standing. Keep your spine until they take even that. The High Elder lifted his staff and struck stone. By rejection before witnesses, she leaves this territory before dawn. She carries no packmark, no claim, no escort. Alara stared at him. No escort means the border rogues will scent me before sunrise. He did not blink. Then travel quickly. Her mate would not meet her eyes. That, more than the words, finally split the numbness. She tore the ceremonial thread from her wrist. It left a red line that burned in the cold air. "You could have done this in private," she said. His jaw tightened, not with regret, but irritation. Private would have invited dispute. Public keeps order. His mother added, "Take off the bridal silver before you go. It was paid for by this pack." Alara removed necklace, bracelets, moon pin, each piece clicking against the stone beside her feet. The dress stayed because she had nothing else. She walked out of the circle with mud soaking the hem and torchlight painting her skin in bands of amber and shadow, while behind her the wedding drums resumed with a different bride's rhythm, loud, practical, already forgetting her name. By dawn, she had crossed 2 ridges and hidden the torn white fabric under river silt. 5 winters passed after that night, and she learned how survival looked when dignity had to travel in secret. She stopped using Silvermane first. Then she stopped meeting anyone's gaze long enough for them to remember her face. In the border town of Greyhook, she rented a narrow room above a tannery where the smell of treated hide covered most scents, and she worked as an herbalist with careful hands and a bowed head. People called her Lark because they preferred names without history. Every morning she mixed suppressants from nightroot, bitter fennel, and ghost mint ash, grinding until her wrists ached, then drinking the metallic brew before opening her shop shutters. The tonic dulled the wild note in her scent and flattened her instincts into something manageable. It also left her light-headed and nauseous by midday, but that price was predictable, and predictable meant alive. Men from patrol bands came through town twice a month. They laughed too loudly, bought pain salve they never used, and asked casual questions that were never casual. Any unmated she-wolf outside formal territory could be claimed, traded, or dragged into protective custody that looked identical to ownership. So Alara stayed small, stayed useful, stayed human. At night, she sat by the single window, counting exits in every building across the alley and rehearsing choices she prayed she would never need. If someone kicks the back door, use the roof ladder. If two voices at once, go through the floor hatch. If they smell what you are, run before they decide what that is worth. She became good at this narrow life. Not happy, not healed. Effective. The call came at dusk on the last market day before winter lock. A boy burst into her shop coughing smoke, words breaking between breaths. "Warehouse 4 is on fire. My sister is inside with the little ones. Please." Alara was already grabbing wet cloths and burn paste before he finished. Outside, wind drove sparks across the lane. The grain warehouse stood 3 streets over, old timber and pitch-sealed walls turning the whole structure into a torch. Town guards shouted for water lines. Neighbors formed panicked buckets from the pump. Someone yelled that the roof was about to go. 2 children stood at the edge of the crowd, sobbing for their brother and cousin trapped in the loading bay. Alara felt the old equation click into place. Stay hidden and live, or reveal and lose everything. She did not hesitate long enough to hate herself for the choice. She tied cloth over her mouth, soaked another strip for her hands, and pushed into the smoke before anyone could stop her. Heat slammed into her chest. Crates had collapsed near the side corridor, blocking the path to the bay. Through the crackling roar, she heard small voices coughing. "Keep talking," she shouted. "Tell me where you are." "Here," one cried. "By the blue cart." A support beam groaned overhead, half burned through and dropping sparks like red rain. Human strength would not move the fallen timber in time. Her whole body shook with the terror of what came next. Do it, and they will know. Do not do it, and children die while you count consequences like a coward. I have hidden for years. I have swallowed ash and fear and my own name. Not this, not them. She reached for what she had buried. Power surged through her muscles in a hot, brutal wave. Her fingers dug under the splintered beam and lifted. Wood cracked. Her shoulders screamed. She heaved once, twice, then flung the timber aside hard enough to smash a crate wall. The children scrambled toward her, faces streaked with soot, eyes wide and stunned. She wrapped one under each arm and ran low through the smoke, following a strip of colder air toward the loading doors. A section of roof dropped behind them with a thunderous crash that shook the floor. When she stumbled into rain and open air, the crowd recoiled as if she had emerged wearing a different skin. The children clung to her neck until their mother tore through the line and gathered them, sobbing gratitude she barely heard. Because the suppressant veil was gone. The scent she had strangled for years spilled into storm wind. Wolf, female, unmated, strong. Heads turned, nostrils flared. One guard took a step toward her with a look she recognized too well. Half calculation, half claim. Alara backed away, shaking so hard her knees threatened to fold. Luminous fear rattled through her like broken glass. Rain hit her face, cooling skin that still burned from the shift of strength. She turned into the nearest alley, then another, choosing darkness over street lamps, distance over breath. By the time she reached the dead-end lane behind the old Cooper's yard, her lungs felt flayed raw. She braced one hand against wet brick and fought the panic rising in thick, choking waves. Footsteps sounded at the alley mouth, not the heavy stumble of guards. Controlled, predatory, certain. A tall man stepped from rain into shadow, black coat plastered to broad shoulders. Amber bled into his irises in the dim light, and the air carried pine, iron, and storm. He stopped 6 paces away, as if measuring the space she could bear. Ilara, he said, voice rough with recognition that made no sense at all. Look at me. Heat pulsed beneath her skin so violently she almost gasped. Her pulse went thunderous. The space between them tightened into an unseen line drawn from sternum to sternum, and for one fractured second she understood exactly what he was to her and exactly why that terrified her. The instinct to run hit first, old and ruthless, but her legs had nothing left for another sprint through rain and smoke. Ilara kept her hand on the wall and forced air into her lungs, watching the stranger without blinking. He had the stillness of a dominant wolf, the kind that did not waste motion because it had never needed to prove power twice. Water tracked down his jaw and soaked the collar of his coat. His scent wrapped the alley in pine and cold iron, and a deep, wild note that pulled at her nerve endings like a hooked thread. "How do you know my name?" Her voice came out hoarse, scraped raw by fire. "Ilara." He said it like recognition, and the air between them snapped taut, heat flashing under her skin while his breath caught once, hard, as if the same strike had gone through him. "Because I have been searching for a scent I was told no longer existed." Thunder rolled over Greyhook's rooftops. At the alley mouth, lantern lights swayed, then sharpened. Patrol voices, nearer than she wanted. The man angled his head toward the sound and swore under his breath, controlled and quiet. "Town guards, plus 2 border runners. They caught your trail when you left the square." Ilara pushed off the wall, panic rising hard enough to make her vision pulse. "Then move. If they find me with you, they will take both of us for questioning." "They will not take me." His mouth thinned in something like grim humor. "They will try to take you. Come with me now, and no one here touches you." She almost laughed at the word come, because men in command always made invitation sound like law. Then he shrugged out of his cloak and held it out. Arms extended, palms visible, no attempt to drape it over her shoulders himself. "Wear this if you want. Don't, if you don't. But decide quickly." The restraint hit her harder than any show of force. He could have crossed the space in a heartbeat. He did not. Ilara snatched the cloak, wrapped it tight against the shiver running through her, and hated that relief came with the warmth. He pivoted toward a narrow service gate she had never noticed and snapped the rusted latch with one clean pull, then waited until she moved first. "Say no. Turn left. Climb the tannery roofs and disappear by dawn. You have survived 5 years by refusing every hand that reached for you. You know how this ends with alphas, with vows, with public ruin wrapped in ritual language. Keep your name buried. Keep your throat unmarked. Keep walking alone." The thought came in present tense urgency, bright and frantic. But her body followed him through the gate anyway. They crossed a maze of back courtyards slick with rain and fish scales, then slipped under a broken arch into an abandoned lane that climbed away from the market quarter. Behind them, whistles split the night as patrols fanned out. The stranger adjusted pace when she faltered, never touching, never looking back for approval. The city thinned. Stone gave way to dark soil and wind-bent firs. Her boots sank at every step, and smoke still lived in her chest, each breath a shallow ache. An hour after the fire bell fell silent, the rain softened to a cold mist that silvered the path. He led her to a ridge overlooking a valley she had only heard about in tavern murmurs, where displaced wolves had rebuilt among ruins after the old war packs fractured. Below, torch lines marked layered defenses, timber walls reinforced with black stone, watch platforms, roofed gardens against winter, kennels, storehouses, and at the center, a long hall stitched together from salvaged beams and newer cut pine. No ornate banners, no ceremonial excess. It looked like survival made visible. When they descended toward the outer gate, sentries emerged from the fog with spears leveled and eyes bright in the dark. Their cloaks bore a simple crest burned into leather, a wolf head circled by 3 ash marks. One woman with a scar across her brow stepped forward first, nostrils flaring as she caught Alara's scent under the cloak. Alpha, she said to him, not lowering her weapon. Unidentified female, unbound, border town smoke on both of you. Explain. So that was the shape of him. Alpha. Alara froze at the word, every old wound waking at once. He moved half a step in front of her, enough to block the nearest spear point without turning it into spectacle. Her name is Alara. She enters under my protection. Any question about her status is a question to me. The woman's gaze flicked to Alara, sharp and assessing, then back to him. Understood. We had reports of a fire rescue in Greyhook. They said a human lifted a beam that should have crushed 3 men. Then the report was wrong about one thing, he said. The sentry lowered her spear and struck fist to chest. Welcome to Stoneheart ground, Alara. Welcome. The word landed strangely, too soft for the iron edges of her life. Alara gave a tense nod and stepped through the gate while eyes tracked her from shadowed posts and open doorways. She saw wolves in every stage of recovery here. Elders with cane-worn hands organizing supply crates, young guards drilling in mud despite the late hour, healers carrying hot water between infirmary tents, children asleep in a converted chapel, guarded by 2 sentries who stood with quiet vigilance. This was not the polished cruelty of her birth pack. It was raw, exhausted, and fiercely held together. At the hall entrance, he paused, turned toward her, and stopped just short of the threshold. You can take the east guest room. Bolt it from inside if that helps you rest. His voice roughened slightly. May I step in first to check it, or do you want to inspect alone? She stared at him. Suspicion still sat high and hard in her throat, but the question itself cracked something she had armored over for years. Choice, offered without argument. Check it, she managed. He inclined his head once and entered. She followed 2 beats later, shoes leaving wet tracks on the stone. The room was plain. Narrow bed, small hearth, washstand, heavy door with fresh iron bolt. No hidden second exit she could see, though she mapped the window latch and ceiling beams in a single sweep out of habit. He set a kettle by the coals, fed kindling into flame, and stepped back to give her space. I am Alistair Stoneheart, he said. If you decide at dawn that you want to leave, I will provide an escort to whichever border road you choose. She tightened the cloak around herself. Alphas do not give strangers options. His expression shifted, brief and bleak. The ones worth following do. The kettle hissed. Her knees wobbled with delayed shock, and she reached for the table edge. Alistair moved on instinct, fast enough to catch her if she fell, then checked himself a breath away. Only when she gave the smallest nod did he close the final inch and steady her by the wrist. The contact struck like a second surge, far stronger than the alley's first ignition. Heat surged up her arm and across her chest in a bright wave. Not pain, not relief. Something vaster and more frightening because it felt like recognition written into bone. A metallic sweet scent flooded the room, like rain striking struck stone. The world narrowed to pulse and breath, and that fierce line pulling taut between them, chest to chest, soul to soul, undeniable. Alistair drew a sharp breath as if he had been hit below the ribs. Amber in his irises deepened to molten gold. His shoulders dropped, sudden and involuntary, as though a weight he had carried for years had finally slipped free. Then his jaw locked when he looked fully at her face, and saw not hunger in her expression, but terror. No, Alara whispered, yanking her hand back. No, I did not ask for this. I know. His voice was low, strained by control. He took one step back, then another, giving the room back to her. I will not force a bond to move faster than your trust. Her instincts sharpened until every detail felt carved in glass. The crackle of hearthwood, the rain tapping slate, the scent of wet leather and moon-touched power, the exact cadence of his breathing as he fought to keep his own wolf from surging forward. She pressed both palms to the table to stop their shaking and failed. It is him. It is true. The part of you that survived by silence is screaming to run, and the part you buried in ghost mint ash is lifting its head at his voice. What if this is another ceremony wearing a kinder mask? What if this is safety only until witnesses gather? What if wanting him is the first mistake? What if refusing him is the last? Breathe. Count exits. Count windows. Count the seconds between his blinks and decide whether predators who ask permission can still break you. Decide whether your body has betrayed you or recognized home before your mind could defend itself. Alistair watched her with an expression she did not have language for, fierce and reverent and wounded all at once. "When I caught your scent in the smoke," he said, each word deliberate, "I thought I was tracking a rogue to secure my border. Then I heard your name in my own head before you spoke it. That has never happened to me. Not once. You expect me to believe that? I expect nothing from you tonight." He reached slowly for the mug he had set near the kettle, poured hot water over crushed willow and mint, and placed it on the table where she could take it without stepping toward him. Then he moved to the doorway and rested one shoulder against the frame, leaving the center of the room open, as if drawing a boundary with his own body and promising not to cross it. Outside, footsteps passed and faded. Guards changing watch. Life in the hall continued, but inside the small room the silence thickened with everything neither of them was ready to name. Alara lifted the cup, hands unsteady, and met his gaze across the firelight. The thread between them tightened again, unmistakable, and this time neither of them looked away. Alara set the cup down with deliberate care, as if one careless movement might shatter the fragile structure holding the room together. "If you keep standing there like a sentry," she said, voice rough, "I cannot decide whether to feel safer or trapped." Alistair's mouth shifted, almost a smile, gone as quickly as it came. "Then I am doing a poor job of helping." He straightened from the doorway and stepped into the corridor, leaving the door half open so she could see him move. "I will be outside. If you want silence, close it. If you want company, leave it as it is." He waited. No command. No pressure wrapped in courtesy. Alara crossed the room on unsteady legs and pushed the door until only a hand's breadth remained. Enough to hear him breathe, not enough to see more than shadow and the line of his shoulder. She bolted it, then stood with her palm on cold iron, pulse still racing. You are tired enough to mistake restraint for kindness. You are frightened enough to mistake kindness for strategy. Breathe anyway. Take what can be tested and leave what cannot. She washed soot from her arms in the basin, hissed when water touched the worst burns, and changed into the plain linen shift folded on the chair. Someone had left it without ceremony. No perfume, no embroidery. Practical cloth for a body that had survived a fire. She drank the tea while sitting on the edge of the bed, boots still on, then lay down fully clothed over the blanket with one hand near the knife she kept in her calf sheath out of habit. Sleep came in jagged pieces. In one dream she stood again under wedding torches, silver thread cutting her wrists while voices turned her name into accusation. In another she smelled smoke and heard children calling from behind a wall she could not lift. She woke hard before dawn, a cry trapped behind her teeth, chest heaving so violently she thought she might retch. The corridor held a low, steady sound. Breath in, breath out, large and calm and unhurried. Alara slid from bed and moved to the crack in the door. Alistair lay curled against the threshold in wolf form, black fur silvered by moonlight from the high windows, massive body angled to block the corridor without touching the wood. One ear lifted when she shifted her weight, then settled again when he caught her scent and recognized her wakefulness. Not gone. Not hovering over her bed. not inside her room because Bond gave him an excuse. Outside, where she could hear that she was not alone and still keep the lock between them. She returned to the bed and sat with her knees drawn up, listening to that steady rhythm until the tremors eased. By the time gray dawn thinned the dark, she had not slept again, but the panic had loosened its grip enough for thought. A soft knock came with first light. "Ilara," Alistair called, voice human again, low through the door. "I brought fresh tea. May I come in?" She stared at the bolt for several beats, then lifted it. He entered carrying a tray with 2 cups, a bowl of oat porridge, and salve wrapped in clean cloth. His hair was still damp from rain or river water, and fatigue sat in the corners of his eyes like old bruises. He placed everything on the table and kept distance. "You were shouting in your sleep," he said. "I did not enter because you did not ask." Most alphas would have called that courtesy unnecessary. "Most alphas taught me the wrong lessons." He gestured toward her forearm. "Burn?" She hesitated, then offered her arm. He knelt, asked, "May I?" and only touched her when she nodded. His hands were large and warm, unexpectedly careful as he spread salve over reddened skin. No possessive grip, no lingering claim, just medicine and attention. "Why?" she asked, unable to stop the question. "Why this much restraint when the bond is pulling at both of us hard enough to hurt?" He sat back on his heels, gaze steady on her face, rather than the pulse at her throat. "Because desire is not permission. Because I have seen what happens when a leader treats need as entitlement. Because power without consent ruins everything it touches." His jaw worked once, and when he spoke again the words came flatter, stripped of ornament. "I confused control with strength for a long time. I thought if I tightened my hand on every decision, nothing could break." Ilara said nothing. He continued. 3 winters ago, after my pack was attacked, my beta asked for 2 days to scout before we retaliated. I heard caution and called it fear. I led a night march through a mountain pass in storm season to prove we were still dominant. He looked down at his hands as if surprised by what they remembered. The pass collapsed. We lost 31 wolves in one night, including his sister and my mother's last living brother. I buried half my people because I wanted obedience more than counsel. The room went very still. "I rebuilt from that," he said quietly, "or tried to. I took this territory with the survivors and swore no one under my name would become collateral for my pride again. So when the bond hit me last night, every possessive instinct I have told me to close my hand and never let you out of reach. I am not doing that. Not now. Not ever." Ilara's throat burned. This was not polished contrition staged for advantage. It was uglier than that, and therefore more convincing. An alpha naming failure without asking to be absolved. Her thoughts rose bright and immediate, present tense and relentless. "You have spent years measuring danger by tone and posture, by whether a man stands between you and a door. This one sleeps on stone outside your room and asks permission to touch burned skin. This one admits he got wolves killed because he needed to be right. Predators do not usually confess where the soft places are. Is that trustworthiness or simply a different tactic? Keep your guard. Keep it. Yet the tight knot behind your ribs eases 1 fraction when he says not ever, and your body records that ease even while your mind argues." She took the cup he offered and drank, mint and willow warming a chest still raw from smoke. "If I decide to leave," she said, testing him again, "you will not send trackers after me." "No." He rose, giving her back her space. "I will send 2 outriders only until you clear the nearest rogue corridor. Then they turn back." "You planned that already." "I plan for outcomes I do not like." A brittle laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "That is the most alpha thing you have said." His answering glance held the faintest spark of dry humor. "I am trying to improve, not become unrecognizable." By late morning, rain had thinned to a pale mist drifting through the inner yard, and the hall bells called for provisional council. Alara nearly refused. Alistair did not press. "You can stay here," he said at her door. "No one enters without your consent." "If I hide now," she replied, pulling his cloak tighter around her shoulders, "they will call it proof of guilt." His gaze sharpened with something like approval and concern braided together. "Then we go together." The council chamber occupied the long hall's western end, rebuilt from charred beams and new stone, scars left visible rather than polished away. Benches rose in tiers around a central floor marked with old pack runes. Allied nobles had arrived by noon, hard-eyed elders from river territories, merchants turned quartermasters, 2 alpha heirs with their entourages, and at the left tier, a woman in sable gray whose posture radiated cultivated authority. Luna Ashford. Her smile when Alara entered was gracious enough to pass at distance and cold enough to cut at close range. Murmurs rippled as scent moved through the room. Unmated female, newly surfaced wolf, bonded to the Stoneheart Alpha by instinct if not yet by right. Alistair guided Alara to stand beside him at the center mark, not behind. A council elder with silver braids struck his staff once. Alpha Stoneheart, reports confirm the Greyhook fire involved forbidden strength display by an unregistered shifter operating under human guise. Explain why this female entered your territory without verification. Alara opened her mouth, but another voice cut across first, smooth and carrying. Luna Ashford rose with theatrical reluctance. "No one disputes the rescue," Luna said. "Compassion can coexist with deception. The issue is security." She concealed identity for years near border trade routes. That is infiltration behavior, whether motivated by fear or design. Standard protocol requires scent chain containment until lineage and allegiance are proven. Scent chain. The word struck Alara like a physical blow. Cold iron links at wrist and throat. Ceremonial humiliation disguised as procedure. The chamber seemed to tilt. She felt every gaze weighing her as risk, as commodity, as a problem to be managed. Alistair moved. He stepped between her and the tears in one fluid motion and undid the clasp at his own throat, pulling his collar aside to bare the vulnerable line of pulse to the room. Gasps broke from the benches. This was not a gesture leaders made lightly. Under pack law, exposed throat before council was declaration and challenge in one. "Any chain placed on her," he said, voice carrying to the rafters, "will be answered by my blood challenge. Name the sponsor, and I will meet them under moon law before sundown." Silence crashed down. The elder's staff hovered midair. One heir looked away first. Another shifted uneasily. Luna's expression held for one beat too long before composure returned. Alistair turned his head slightly toward Alara, enough for her to hear though the chamber still listened. "No one in this hall touches you without your yes." The crux of it settled in her chest with startling force. He was not merely defending her in private where tenderness cost little. He was staking authority before witnesses where defiance could fracture alliances he needed to keep his pack fed through winter. An older noble cleared his throat. "Alpha Stoneheart, you would risk civil dispute over one unknown female." Alistair's eyes hardened. "I would risk dispute to uphold my law. We do not bind survivors for surviving." A younger councilwoman from the river seats leaned forward. "Then what is her status here, if not detainee?" Alistair did not hesitate. He crossed to the high table, pulled out the carved chair at his right, and looked directly at Alara. "Sit." The hall inhaled. She walked to the chair on legs that felt almost separate from her body and sat, spine straight despite the tremor in her hands. From this height she could see the whole chamber, including Luna Ashford's tightened jaw and the quick, assessing looks pass between allied delegates, recalculating what this meant. Not consort hidden in shadows, not suspect on a chain. At his right hand. Protected equal. publicly named without the word needing to be spoken. The elder lowered his staff at last. "Noted for record," he said carefully. "Ilara enters Stoneheart territory under Alpha protection and provisional standing pending formal review." Luna inclined her head, smile restored by effort. "If that is the will of this hall, I defer." Her gaze slid to Ilara, bright and unreadable. "May your presence prove as harmless as your champion believes." Ilara held her gaze and smelled, beneath polished cedar and council incense, a trace of night bloom perfume too sweet for daylight. Distinctive. Deliberate. She filed it away without understanding why the detail mattered. Proceedings moved to grain inventories, winter patrol rotations, and border levies. Voices rose and fell. Decisions were recorded. Through it all, no one asked Ilara to move from that chair. When the chamber finally emptied, twilight had begun to stain the high windows violet. Ilara remained seated until the last ally left and the heavy doors closed. Alistair stood across from her, shoulders tight with the effort of holding command for hours. "You did not have to do that," she said. "Yes," he answered. "I did." "They will make you pay for it." His expression softened at the edges. "They already were. I simply chose what price I preferred." She rose slowly, crossed the space between them, and for the first time touched him by choice, fingers resting at his wrist where his pulse beat steady and strong beneath skin. "I am not ready for all of this," she said, voice quiet but clear. "The bond, the court, being seen. I know. But I am done being handled like evidence." She drew a breath that felt new in her lungs. "If I stay, it will be standing. Not caged. Not hidden." A flicker of relief moved through him, careful and profound. "Then we build from there." Ilara did not step away immediately. Outside, evening bells marked the change of watch. And inside the rebuilt hall, she felt her guards shift. Not fallen, not gone, but opening by one narrow gate she had kept barred for years. The narrow gate stayed open for only a breath before the corridor outside filled with footsteps and low voices. A steward appeared at the chamber door, bowed to Alistair, then looked at Ilara with careful neutrality that felt rehearsed. "Lady Ashford requests a final audience on winter allocations," he said. "She is waiting in the West Colonnade." Alistair's expression did not change, but his pulse jumped once beneath Ilara's fingers. "Tell her tomorrow." The steward hesitated. "She says the grain contracts cannot wait until morning." Ilara released Alistair's wrist and stepped back. "Go," she said softly. "If stores fail, everyone pays for it." His gaze held hers, searching for strain she could not hide. "I want Mara with you. I can walk from here to my room without vanishing. That is not what I fear." He signaled to the doorway. "Captain Mara escorts Ilara." By the time Mara reached them, Luna Ashford had entered the colonnade herself. She moved through torchlight in sable wool and silver clasps, graceful as ritual and twice as calculated. She stopped at the threshold, offered a shallow incline of her head to Ilara, then shifted her attention to Alistair, as though no one else in the corridor mattered. "Forgive the interruption," Luna said. "I would not ask at this hour if your people's winter did not depend on signatures tonight." Alistair's voice stayed level. "Then speak." Luna folded her hands. 3 houses will release reserve grain only if supply authority remains in experienced hands. Your court is unsettled. Your guest has already complicated confidence." Her eyes flicked to Ilara and returned, polished and cool. "I can steady that, if you let me." "By steady," Alistair said, "you mean control. By steady, I mean survival." Luna's smile did not reach her eyes. "You rebuilt a broken pack from ash and stubbornness. Admirable. But rebuilding requires alliances, and alliances require predictability. A female who hid her scent for years under a human identity is not predictable." Alara felt Mara tense beside her. Luna turned fully then, letting the civility thin just enough for the blade beneath it to show. "You were clever to live as you did," Luna said to Alara, voice low and almost intimate. "Truly. But talents shaped by concealment do not disappear simply because a bond appears." Alistair took one step forward. "Enough." Luna's posture remained composed. "I agree. Enough uncertainty. Sign the allocation authority tonight, and let the council see continuity. If not, shortages will be blamed where panic always points first." She gave Alara a final glance, faintly sympathetic in the way a hunter might pity a trapped animal. "Good evening." She left them with cedar incense and night bloom perfume trailing in the stone corridor. Too sweet, too deliberate, clinging at the back of Alara's throat. Mara watched her go. "She never asks for small things," the captain muttered. A scar cut pale across her brow when she frowned. "Her house funded half the emergency caravans after the war. She calls it charity. It is leverage with polished boots." Alara turned to her. She expected to be Luna. Mara gave a hard nod. Since she was old enough to speak at councils, her father negotiated it with Alistair's mother years ago, before the pass collapse, before everything broke. No mating vow was ever made, but Luna has treated the future as already hers. Alistair's jaw tightened. "And she confuses entitlement with law." Mara added, "She also has friends in quartermaster ranks. If she wants a rumor to become record, it becomes record." The crux sharpened with brutal clarity. Luna did not need claws in the dark. She had ledgers, signatures, and hungry houses waiting for an excuse to choose stability over truth. Alara walked back to the east wing with Mara at her side, and the scent of night bloom still needling her memory. At her door she paused, then looked toward the supply courtyards below. Lanterns still moved between storehouses. Quartermasters were working late. "I want to see the grain logs," she said. Mara blinked. "Now?" "Now." The main storage hall smelled of old wood, dust, and dried wheat. Men and women in thick coats shifted sacks by lamplight, while clerks copied numbers at a side table. Alara kept to shadow, listening first. Two workers near the weigh-scale spoke in low voices. "Lady Ashford wants the northern bins sealed before dawn," one said. "Why seal now?" "Orders changed. Preservative treatment tonight." Alara's instincts sharpened. Preservative, this late, after drying and stacking, made little practical sense. She moved closer to the bins under cover of Mara asking the clerk for patrol receipts. Near the third stack, she crouched and pressed fingertips into spilled grain along a seam in the burlap. A bitter metallic note rose beneath the wheat. Not rot. Not mold. Something added. She pinched a few kernels and held them beneath her nose again, then passed them to Mara. "Do you smell that?" Mara inhaled, frowned, then looked sharply toward the workers. "Faint. Wrong." Alara scanned the floor and found a dusting of pale powder caught in a crack between planks. She wrapped a strip of clean cloth around her fingers, gathered a small sample, and knotted it tight. "This goes to the healers for analysis, logged under witness." Mara signaled a clerk. "Record it. Sealed sample from bin 3, midnight inspection, by my order." The clerk hesitated, eyes darting from Mara to Alara. "Noted," he said, but his hand shook as he wrote. They left with the sample stored in a waxed vial and Mara's seal pressed into soft resin. Alara held the vial in her palm all the way back, feeling the non-trivial weight of 3 grains and pale dust that might decide whether a pack starved or survived. By the second evening after council, the first rumors had multiplied faster than frost on glass. Some said Alara had rescued children only to infiltrate Stoneheart walls. Some said she had ensnared the Alpha by scent trick. Others lowered their voices when she passed and called her useful, which felt worse than hatred, because it measured her only by service. She spent dawn in the healing house grinding willow bark and foxleaf, while healer Tamsin compared the grain sample against known blights. No fungus pattern, Tamsin murmured, peering over a heated dish. This is an admixture, bitter root and wolfsbane trace, too low for immediate death, high enough to weaken over time. She looked up, alarm sharpening her face. If distributed through winter loaves, fighters lose strength within days. Elders first, then anyone under ration stress. Alara steadied herself against the table edge. Can you prove deliberate poisoning? Given enough sample, yes. We need source comparison. Tamsin capped the dish and stamped the record slate. This stays in infirmary lock under my mark. When Alara stepped back into the corridor, Alistair was waiting, forearms braced on the stone railing outside the healer wing. He had removed his cloak, sleeves rolled to the elbow, runes faint beneath skin where strain pulled his control thin. He looked up at her with that same fierce attention that always made her feel seen and cornered at once. Well? He asked. Not mold. Poisoned in small doses. She handed him Tamsin's signed slip. Designed to drain, not kill quickly. His mouth hardened. That is sabotage aimed at endurance, not spectacle. Someone wants us weak enough to bargain. They stood close enough for the bond to hum, a low thrum in her chest that rose when he stepped in and quieted when he gave her space. He lifted a hand, stopped short of touching her cheek, and asked with his eyes. She nodded once. His fingers brushed soot-dark hair back from her temple, careful, brief, reverent. The pull between them was no longer a single spark. It was accumulation, steady heat beneath skin, awareness that tracked his movement across any room, relief at his presence, followed by fear of needing it. Alara hated that fear. She hated needing anything she could not lock in a box. You are standing in daylight with an alpha who asks before he touches you, and your body leans toward him while your mind inventories escape routes. You are not broken for wanting both safety and distance. You are not faithless for doubting tenderness that arrives after years without it. Breathe. One breath, another. If trust is built, it is built in moments this small, this ordinary, this unglamorous. A hand that pauses, a question asked, an answer honored. Alistair lowered his hand. I sent riders to Greyhook this morning. They are checking apothecary logs for bulk purchases of suppression herbs under your old alias. Alara stiffened. Lark. Yes. His gaze stayed steady. If someone is building a frame, they will use what can be traced to you. And if the riders find nothing? Then we have absence. Sometimes absence is evidence. Night settled early, wind rattling shutters along the north wall. At supper, Mara arrived at their table with a folded dispatch and a look Alara had begun to dread. Riders returned, Mara said quietly. Greyhook apothecary ledger page for last month is missing. Shopkeeper swears it was there 2 days ago. Also, Quartermaster Joran filed emergency requisition for nightroot and ghost mint ash stamped with your name. Alara stared. I never signed requisition. Mara handed her the copy. The signature at the bottom read Lark in a cramped hand. Almost right. Wrong in one stroke Alara had never made. Good forgery for strangers. A wound for anyone who knew her. Alistair read the page and swore softly. Where was the requisition processed? Through council intake with Ashford oversight seal. The resulting silence felt like the edge of a blade. An hour later, the strike came in full daylight form, cleaner than ambush, and more dangerous for it. Hall bells rang 3 sharp notes, summoning all ranking members to emergency session. When Alara and Alistair entered, the chamber was packed. Allied delegates recalled from guest quarters. Quartermasters lined along the rear wall, elders stiff with indignation. At the center table sat 3 opened ledgers, a cloth bag of dried herbs, and 2 jars of contaminated grain. Luna Ashford stood beside the evidence with ritual composure, dressed in mourning gray as if for a tragedy she regretted but welcomed. "I requested this hearing with reluctance," she said, carrying her voice without strain. "Our stores were tampered with. These herbs were found hidden beneath floorboards in the East Guest Wing. The requisitions bear Alara's trade alias. The timing aligns with her arrival." Murmurs broke like surf across stone. Alara stepped forward. "Those herbs are common compounds for scent suppression and burn care. Possession proves nothing." Luna tilted her head. "Concealment compounds in grain stores prove intent." Alistair moved to Alara's side, shoulders squared. "Any accusation proceeds under evidentiary rule. Where is chain of custody record for this so-called discovery?" A council scribe lifted a slate. "Recorded by Ashford stewards at 6th Bell." Mara's voice cut in from the rear. "Without captain witness, procedure breach." Luna did not look at her. "In crisis, we act first, tidy formalities second." The elder with silver braids struck his staff. "Enough. Under Moon Accord, suspected internal sabotage tied to concealed identity mandates tribunal review at dawn." The words hit like cold iron. Alara kept her face still by force. "And until dawn?" Another elder answered, avoiding her eyes. "Temporary scent chain confinement to prevent flight or influence." Alistair's power rolled through the room, pressure without transformation, enough to make torches shudder. "No." Luna turned toward him, sorrow arranged across her features. "If you refuse Accord protocol, Allied recognition dissolves before winter. You cannot feed this territory on pride." He bared his throat scar in challenge once more. "Then let any sponsor step forward." No one moved. No one accepted. But no one withdrew the demand. A courier entered at speed, mud on boots, and handed sealed parchment to the elder. 3 wax marks stamped the fold: River House, Mountain House, Ashford. The elder read, went pale, then announced to the hall, "Formal petition filed. Tribunal is binding. Non-compliance constitutes rogue sheltering and forfeiture of trade protections." The chamber shifted from argument to trap in a single breath. Alara looked at the table where the planted herbs lay, at the forged signature, at Luna's patient stillness. The scheme was complete now. Poison to weaken, paper to frame, law to execute. No blade needed when institutions could be turned into one. Guards approached with chain links wrapped in cloth to mute the sound. Mara stepped in front of them, hand to hilt, waiting for Alistair's order. Alistair's eyes met Alara's, wildfire and restraint in equal measure, asking without words whether to burn the room down or trust her lead. She heard her own pulse, steadying. "Do not fight them here," she said, voice low enough for him alone. "If you challenge the Accord now, Luna gets exactly what she wants." The guards halted 3 paces away. The elder raised his staff again. "At dawn, trial begins." And in the center of the chamber, with chains waiting and every gaze fixed on her, Ilara understood that by sunrise she would either reclaim her name in open law or lose it forever. The elder motioned to the guards again. "Secure her." Chain links whispered against cloth as they advanced. Mara shifted her stance, blade half drawn, while Alistair's aura pressed through the room like a storm front, enough to make 2 torches gutter and a scribe drop his pen. Luna did not flinch. She watched Alara with calm expectation, the look of someone who had built a cage in advance and was only waiting for the door to close. "Alara," Alistair said, voice low, controlled, dangerous, "say the word, and this hearing ends here." That was the trap. Luna had stacked law, paper, and hunger into a single provocation, betting Alistair would tear the Accord apart with his own hands and prove every accusation of instability true. Alara lifted her chin and stepped forward before the guards reached her. "I invoke trial of scent and memory under Moon Accord," she said, clear enough that the far benches heard every syllable. Silence landed hard. The silver-braided elder stared. That invocation requires full oath exposure. If your memory thread fails coherence, your heart can stop under backlash. I know. You are not council rank, another elder snapped. She is accuser and accused under the same petition, Mara cut in. Accord permits direct invocation when procedural breach is alleged. Luna's expression tightened for the first time. Convenient legal creativity from a captain already compromised. Alara did not look at her. I request Oathstone, Moonwater, and all evidence tables sealed until witness sequence begins. No private handling, no substitutions. Alistair turned to the elders. Granted. Luna stepped in smoothly, voice sharpened to urgency. This is theater to delay confinement. She concealed her nature for years, used suppression compounds, and now asks us to trust a sensory vision over physical proof. Alara finally faced her. Physical proof with broken custody and forged signatures. A murmur rolled through the chamber. The elder struck his staff once. Invocation accepted under protest. Hearing reconvenes at first light in the lower tribunal circle. Until then, Alara remains under guard without chain, by Captain Witness and Alpha Guarantee. Luna's jaw locked, then smoothed into composure. So be it. The chamber broke into movement, delegates clustering in tense knots, guards repositioning at every exit. Alistair stayed close as Mara led Alara from the floor, but he did not touch her until they reached the corridor shadow beyond the hearing doors. You just wagered your life, he said quietly. I wagered it years ago when I chose to keep breathing after they cast me out. She looked up at him, pulse loud but steady. If I let them chain me tonight, they write the story before dawn. His gaze held hers, fierce with fear he was trying not to show. Then at dawn, we make sure they cannot. By first light, frost filmed the tribunal steps and the whole lower court smelled of stone, wax, and wolf tension stretched to breaking. The lower circle had been built before the current hall, a sunken ring of black rock cut with oath runes that glowed faint silver when sworn testimony began. Oathstone stood at the center, shoulder high and worn smooth by generations of hands, its base ringed by shallow channels for moonwater. Every seat was filled. Allied delegates sat rigid in winter cloaks. Quartermasters stood under guard. Tamsin waited near the witness rail with sealed dishes and record slates. At the rear, 2 Greyhook riders looked travel-worn and grim. Alara descended the steps between Mara and Alistair, hearing whispers move through the tiers. She will fail. She will run. She cannot hold a memory thread under full exposure. Luna stood opposite in morning gray again, ash-silver hair pinned high with a slender ornament that caught torchlight at one end. Her face wore solemn restraint, but the night bloom scent reached Alara even across stone. Sweet. Distinct. Unmistakable now that she stopped doubting her own senses. The elder opened proceedings with ritual phrases, then signaled for prosecution sequence. Luna did not take the accuser stand herself. She let stewards and clerks speak first, layering procedure like netting. A steward testified that suppression herbs were found beneath floorboards in Alara's guest wing. A clerk produced requisitions signed Lark for nightroot and ghost mint ash, processed under emergency seal. A quartermaster claimed he had seen Alara near northern bins before contamination was identified. Each statement was tidy, almost too tidy, delivered with the flat confidence of rehearsed lines. When Alistair challenged chain of custody again, Luna inclined her head with practiced regret. Minor administrative irregularities do not erase material fact. The elder turned to Alara. You may answer. She stepped into the center circle. I answer by invocation. Tamsin brought a shallow silver cup. Moonwater reflected torch flame like shattered glass. The elder spoke the warning once more, formal and cold. If you proceed, there is no withdrawal. Alara took the cup with both hands. Her thoughts sharpened into present tense clarity. This is fear. This is memory. This is the same room shape as another night when voices decided your worth in public and called it order. Not again. Not while your name is still yours. She drank. Cold struck first, then heat, then a violent rush under her skin as every suppression layer she had built over 5 years tore loose at once. Her breath caught, knees buckled. Alistair moved one step, stopped when she lifted her hand to hold him back. "I stand," she said through clenched teeth. She drew a small knife from her belt, cut her palm, and pressed blood to oathstone. Silver runes flared bright enough to throw hard shadows across the tears. The air thickened with scent and truth-binding pressure. Her aura rose full and unmasked, not hidden, not diluted, wolf power rolling from her in visible waves that made two witnesses stagger and grip the rail. "Memory thread," she whispered. "Night of poisoning." The stone answered. Sound and scent spilled into the chamber as shared sensory echo, not image alone, but lived fragments. Midnight lamps in the storage hall, burlap shifted by gloved hands, a pale powder shaken into grain seams, altered manifests sealed with warmed wax, and beneath cedar incense a trail of night bloom perfume so strong it stung. A signet pressed into red wax with Ashford crest. A female voice, low and precise. "Seal bin 3 first. Northern rations rotate by dawn. Leave the requisition copies where the captain will find them." The thread snapped forward again, showing the edge of a hand with a slender ring turning ledger pages, then a pause at the signature line where Lark was copied with one incorrect stroke. Gasps broke through the chamber. Luna's control cracked. "Fabrication," she said sharply. "Scent memory is impressionistic and easily biased." Tamsin stepped forward before the elder could respond. "Not with oath runes at full bind. Also, my analysis confirms wolfsbane trace and bitter root admixture in contaminated kernels, matching residue found on the sealing ladle recovered this morning from Ashford Annex stores." A Greyhook rider raised his hand for recognition. "I testify the ledger page for apothecary's sales was removed between our first and second inspections. Ashford Courier was present in town that interval, confirmed by gate marks." Luna's gaze cut toward him with naked fury, then back to the elders. "Circumstantial noise. None of this proves intent." Alara swayed, pain biting up her arm from the oathstone link, but held her ground. "Then swear denial under binding." The elder lifted his staff. "Lady Luna Ashford, approach and swear." For one stretched moment, Luna did not move. Then she walked to the edge of the circle with measured grace, lifted her right hand over the runes, and opened her mouth to speak. She never finished. In a blur of gray wool and silver metal, she lunged across the gap, ripping the hairpin from her own coil and driving its wolfsbane tip toward Alara's neck. Chaos detonated. Delegates shouted. Guards surged. Alistair slammed into the chamber doors with both palms and roared for lockdown, and the iron bars dropped from above as oath runes ignited around the circle, sealing every exit under tribunal law. Alara saw the strike coming late, body drained from invocation, but instinct took over. She caught Luna's wrist inches from her throat, twisted hard, and redirected the force downward. The pin drove into the oak tribunal table beside Luna's hand with a splintering crack, quivering upright. Luna cried out, tried to wrench free, and Alara shoved her back into the rune line. "Do not," Alara said, breath shaking, voice lethal and clear. Luna bared her teeth, all polish gone. "You were supposed to kneel." Alistair reached the circle edge, power burning in his gaze, but the runes held him outside while active testimony bound the floor. "No one moves," he ordered the hall. "Truth sequence continues now." The elder's voice trembled but carried. "Attempted assault under oath invokes compulsory confession. Lady Ashford, speak truth or choke on silence." Silver fire crawled up Luna's wrists where the rune light touched skin. She fought it, jaw clamped, then bent as if struck in the gut when the binding tightened. "I paid Quartermaster Joran," she gasped. 3 stewards, 2 scribes. "Why?" the elder demanded. "To weaken Stoneheart stores before deep winter, to force emergency authority transfer." "Did you plant evidence against Alara?" "Yes." The word tore out of her. "Suppression herbs in the East Wing, forged requisition in the name Lark, missing ledger page removed by my courier." Murmurs turned to open outrage. One allied delegate stood, face ashen. "You petitioned us to endorse execution on fabricated treason." Luna laughed once, bitter and ragged under rune pressure, and stared straight at Alara. "He was mine by blood and title. I was raised for that place. You arrived from smoke and took it with one scent." Alara stepped closer, exhausted, hand still bleeding onto stone. "A title can be granted, but a bond cannot be forged from hunger and lies." The elder struck his staff 3 times. "Record full confession. Under Accord and Pack law, Luna Ashford is stripped of rank, holdings, and council privilege. Sentence: permanent exile beyond all recognized Pack borders under moon-marked restraint. Effective immediately. Witnessed by this court." Guards moved in. Luna fought once, then stilled when rune shackles sealed around her wrists with white light. As they led her up the steps, she turned her head for one last look at Alistair, then Alara. Hatred and disbelief braided so tightly it looked like grief. No one spoke for her. When the doors opened and the exile party took Luna into the morning glare, the tribunal remained frozen for several heartbeats, as if the room needed to relearn its own shape without her in it. Then sound returned in fragments. Scribes calling records, captains issuing orders, delegates demanding audits of every Ashford contract before midday. Alara's knees finally gave. Alistair caught her before she hit the stone, one arm around her back, the other bracing her injured hand above the blood channels so the oath runes could fade cleanly. "You held," he said against her hair, voice rough with relief. "You held all the way through." She let herself lean for exactly 1 breath, then lifted her head and looked at the elders, at the delegates, at the whole court that had watched her nearly chained and then watched her stand. "Seal the grain stores," she said, hoarse but steady. "Recheck every manifest with captain and healer witness, and enter this into law record. Concealment for survival is not treason." This time, when the elder answered, he bowed first. "Noted for record, Ilara Silvermane." The elder's bow altered the room more than the confession had. Alara felt it in the way captains waited for her words instead of speaking over them, in the way scribes lifted fresh slates when she named procedure, and in the way no chain touched her skin as Mara escorted her from the circle. Tamsin met them in the infirmary with hot water, clean bandages, and the sealed evidence box already on the table. "Before anyone asks for signatures," she said, "we close every open thread." She unlatched the box and named each item while a clerk wrote. Mara's waxed vial from bin 3, analyzed and entered. Contaminated grain jars, sealed for Accord archive. Recovered sealing ladle with residue match, entered. Forged requisition marked Lark with incorrect stroke, entered as falsified. Removed apothecary ledger page, recovered from Ashford courier satchel at Dawngate search, entered. Wolfsbane hairpin from tribunal table, entered as assault weapon. Mara added, "Quartermaster Joran and the 3 stewards are in holding. The 2 scribes named under binding are separated for sworn statements. The courier from Greyhook is under Captain Guard and already confessed transport of the missing page." The clerk hesitated over one line, then looked up. The West Colonnade steward who announced Lady Ashford requested private audience asked to speak. He said he knew the request was pretext, but feared refusing her order. Alara remembered his rehearsed neutrality, the careful blankness. Record it as coercion disclosure and keep him on restricted duty, not punishment detail. He stepped forward before being named. Alistair, standing by the door like a wall that had learned patience, nodded once. Done. By moonrise, frost had hardened the edges of the sacred stone circle above the valley, and the full pack gathered with allied delegates as witness. Torches burned low and steady. No wedding drums, no theater. Only law, breath, and the old stones that had seen both rejection and restoration. Alistair stepped into the center first and removed his cloak, then his weapons, placing each on the altar slab in plain sight. He turned to Alara and stopped at respectful distance, amber in his gaze bright under moonlight. "Before witnesses and moon law," he said, voice carrying cleanly through the cold, "I ask for consent to complete the bond. Not because the pull exists, because you choose it." He opened his hands, palms up. "If your answer is no, I remain your ally, your co-ruler, and your shield as long as you want me." The silence that followed was vast enough to hold every version of her life at once. Torch smoke, wedding silver stripped from her throat, a locked room with steady breathing outside the door, a tribunal where she chose standing over chains. "I am here now," she thought in present tense clarity, heart pounding against healed and unhealed places alike. "I am not evidence. I am not exile waiting for permission. I choose. I choose." She walked to him until only breath separated them. "Yes," she said. "By my will. By my name. Yes." A sound moved through the circle, not loud, more exhale than cheer. Alistair bowed his head first, then looked at her for one final confirmation. She tipped her chin, exposing the junction of neck and shoulder. His hand lifted and paused at her jaw until she leaned into his palm. His bite was deliberate, not a strike, but a vow delivered through teeth and pulse. Pain flared sharp and white for a heartbeat, enough to pull a gasp from her, then transformed almost instantly into spreading heat that poured down her spine and through her chest like thaw water breaking winter ground. Golden silver light threaded beneath her skin in fine luminous lines, visible at her wrists, her throat, the cut in her palm that sealed itself as the bond locked deeper. The pull between them, once taut and frantic, settled into powerful alignment, like a storm finally finding its riverbed. Alistair held the mark with reverence, then released and pressed his forehead to hers. His voice was rough, barely above breath. "Mine." Alara's hands were shaking, not from fear now, but from the magnitude of being fully seen and not cast aside for it. She touched the fresh mark at her neck, felt warmth pulse in time with his heartbeat, then slid her hand to his throat. "Yours," she whispered, and bared her teeth. He tipped his head back, offering the pulse point without flinch. She bit where his life beat strongest, a mirrored claim, pain and fierce joy blooming together as bond energy surged again, brighter, steadier, twin currents joining. A low thrum built in her chest and answered in his, wolves surfacing not in frenzy but in profound calm. She tasted moon salt and iron and oath, then released and sealed the mark with her palm over his skin. "Mate," he whispered. "Mate," she answered. For several breaths they simply held each other, foreheads touching, both marked, both breathing hard while the circle's runes glowed and faded to soft silver. No applause broke the moment. Mara stood with her fist over her heart. Tamsin wiped at her eyes with no embarrassment. Even the silver-braided elder looked younger by 10 years when he stepped forward and spoke the formal recognition. "By witness, by consent, by reciprocal mark, Alara Silvermane is acknowledged Stoneheart Luna and equal sovereign in this territory." Alistair drew her against him then, not possessive, anchoring. The settled bond felt different from the earlier hunger, less wildfire, more hearth. a constant living line that did not demand and did not disappear when she stepped away. At first bell the next morning, the council reconvened, and peace was built in clauses, signatures, and enforcement teeth. Alara stood at the right table while scribes copied the new statutes she dictated with Mara and Tamsin flanking her. Exile protection corridors through 3 border routes, sanctuary status for unmated females, and concealed shifters who could demonstrate survival motive, mandatory dual witness custody for all tribunal evidence, scent chain confinement prohibited before preliminary hearing except in active violence cases, quartermaster audits under healer oversight, each moon cycle through winter. The river councilwoman who had questioned her first signed without amendment. The older noble who had called her unknown asked for one wording change, then accepted when Alara tightened it instead of softening. Alistair signed last, then pressed his thumb beside hers on the final page. Ruler and ruler. Equal authority recorded in black ink and wax. Mara brought the sentencing slate before noon. Joran and the bribed stewards accepted binding labor terms in outer rebuilding camps under guard. The 2 scribes lose office for 10 years and enter restitution service in the store courts. The West Colonnade steward who disclosed coercion keeps position under review. She glanced at Alara's new mark, then met her eyes with rare softness. Also, Luna Ashford crossed the northern boundary at dawn. Moonmark restraint verified by all 3 escort houses. She cannot re-enter recognized territory without triggering a cord hunt. No loose ends, no hidden claws waiting in shadow. Just before evening meal, the 2 children from the warehouse fire arrived at the hall with their guardian, the woman who had pulled them from Alara's arms in the rain. Her name was Anwen, and exhaustion sat deep in her face, but her chin was steady. She placed a folded petition on the table between Alara and Alistair. Greyhook is still unstable, she said. I am taking contract work on the Southern River for 2 years. The boys need one home, not handoffs between neighbors. They ask for yours. Her voice trembled only once. Not because I do not love them. Because I do. The boys stood shoulder to shoulder, scrubbed clean, trying to look brave. Ilara knelt so they did not have to crane their necks. Do you understand what this means? She asked gently. The older one nodded. It means we stay. It means no one sells our winter blankets when grain prices jump. It means you are the one we run to. Ilara looked up at Alistair. The bond carried his answer before he spoke, warm and certain. If you both consent, he said to the boys, then to Anwen, we accept guardianship under pack law tonight, with open visiting rights and your name kept in their records as kin. Anwen exhaled like someone setting down a weight she had carried too long. Thank you. At supper, the hall was loud with ordinary life, spoons on wood bowls, patrol jokes, Tamsin arguing with a cook about salt, Mara teaching one boy how to knot a training strap while the other sat between Ilara and Alistair and fell asleep halfway through bread. When Alistair lifted the child carefully and settled him against his shoulder, nobody stared as if such tenderness contradicted power. Later, after the fires burned low and the valley wind softened, Ilara stood on the balcony above the rebuilt courtyards and watched lanterns move along the sanctuary road she had written into law that morning. Wolves she did not know yet were already using it, packs of 2 and 3 crossing under Captain Escort toward shelter instead of chains. Alistair came to stand beside her, their marks warm in the dark. You are quiet, he said. She leaned into him, feeling the bond settle deeper with each shared breath. I was listening for the old silence, she said, the one that came after they cast me out. And? She looked down at the lit windows, at Mara making one last round, at Tamsin leaving the infirmary with her satchel, at 2 children asleep in rooms that would still be theirs at dawn. It is gone. His hand found hers. No urgency. No fear. Mine. he murmured, smiling this time. Alara turned, pressed her forehead to his, and answered with full, unguarded certainty. Yours, mate.